And as the family left the chapel, a sight many didn't expect to see. Princes William and Harry leaving together with Kate, talking as normal. A fond and final farewell for the Duke of Edinburgh.
Hello, I'm Paul Berry. Welcome to Media Watch. Man, hold the front page. William and Harry exchanged brotherly words at their grandfather's funeral, which, thanks to the pandemic, was stripped back to just 30 guests. And with no crowds to obscure their prey, those pesky body language experts like Louise Marler had an uncluttered view of the royals' every move, so they could reveal their secrets.
And their role was just duty, discipline, respect. Walk straight ahead, look straight ahead. So any little thing stood out dramatically.
And those little things included hidden signs and symbols you didn't even know about.
How the royal family jewels worn to the funeral of Prince Philip carried secret meaning.
Wow! And why was the Queen's choice of brooch at her husband's funeral significant? Because, said the Herald Sun,
the Queen had also worn the brooch to Harry and Meghan's wedding.
Aha! Leading to the not-so-obvious question,
was it a message of unity and peace?
Or was it because the Queen liked the brooch? We may never know. But with the world's media gawking on, every little thing was pulled apart, and none more so than this.
Well, perhaps before we get to that, we should reflect on the fact that here are the two brothers and Catherine walking up the hill.
Walking and talking. But according to the Daily Mail, this moment of magic did not just happen.
Charles's funeral masterstroke. How the prince's off-the-cuff gesture forcing the royals to walk together to Windsor Castle after the service may just reunite his warring sons.
As the limousines drew up, Prince Charles used the briefest of gestures to send them away.
Except, if you take a closer look at the Daily Mail's video, you can see the man waving away the royal limos is not Charles at all. Whoops! So much for the masterstroke. Meantime, what on earth did those feuding brothers actually say to each other? Thanks to the British tabloids enlisting some lip readers, we now know.
Prince Harry told his brother Philip's service was as he would have wanted. Yes, it was great, wasn't it? Prince William is believed to have replied. Absolutely beautiful service. Ah, the music.
Maybe not what the newspaper editors were hoping for. A challenge to a duel would have been far more exciting. But as body language expert Michael Kelly told 7 News,
it seemed like there's no rancour at all. The brothers could have been walking down the country lane. Reports of the brothers' friction must be exaggerated.
The media exaggerate? Fancy that. Not to be outdone, the Courier Mail was also puffing up its coverage with more body language mumbo-jumbo. The Queen was very vulnerable and frail. Charles was isolated in his own grief, and Andrew was slightly pompous. We should add the unanimous verdict on Kate was one of triumph. And what about the women's mags? Well, faced with an impossible deadline, they used all the tricks in the book to cover the story for their Monday editions, with Women's Day declaring,
William and Harry, reunited at last.
But what do you know? That picture is actually of the brothers in happier times on Anzac Day 2018, with those giveaway red poppies and medals digitally erased. And that's not Harry rushing back for Philip's funeral, it's him arriving in the Caribbean 5 years ago. The lack of face masks and bright sunshine should have given it away. New Idea were also dipping into the photo archives to deceive their readers.
Kate calls
truce
on brothers feud.
But those heartwarming images of Harry, Kate and William together were taken from the memorial service for the Grenfell Tower victims in 2017. And the shot of Harry kissing Charles was in 2018, not at a funeral, but at an environmental meeting about coral reefs, with Charles's jacket appropriately turned black. You would think there would have been enough current photos of the royal family without all this cheating, but sadly, it appears not. But now to the classroom project that made headlines around the country.
Exclusive!
School whitewash.
Primary students given a lesson in hating cops.
That was the Daily Telegraph's front page on Wednesday, featuring provocative posters at Sydney's Lindfield Learning Village School, responding to the Black Lives Matter movement, with the Education Minister and the Telegraph making it clear what they thought inside the paper.
Lesson in how to brainwash.
A furious education minister warned teachers political activism has no place in classrooms after a Sydney primary school displayed student-made posters emblazoned with the words "Stop Killer Cops" and "Pigs out of the country."
And the power of the telly had everyone wanting a piece of the story. In the early hours, reporters for 7 and 9 were dispatched to the then dark and empty campus to rehash the paper's scoop.
Today, Sydney reporter Gabrielle Boyle is at the school in Lindfield. Gabby, the Education Minister says there's no place for politicising our primary schools.
Let's go live to 7 News reporter Samantha Brett in Sydney with the details. Sam, what did the signs actually say?
Eddie, good morning. Well, according to reports in the Daily Telegraph this morning.
And it wasn't just the Education Minister who was mad. The Police Minister fronted cameras for 7 and 9 to express his outrage too.
We don't have a race problem here in Australia, and these left-wing academics who are quite happy to say every time an Australian soldier sets foot overseas that it's not our war. Well, this isn't our war. This is nothing short of indoctrination, and it will eventually put these kids' lives at risk because when they're in trouble, they won't know who to turn to.
Now, you might have thought a minister declaring Australia does not have a race problem would have prompted a follow-up or two from the Sunrise pair. You might also have thought blaming the school for indoctrination when it was the kids that came up with the slogans was a trifle unfair. In a letter to parents, Principal Stephanie McConnell apologised to those offended and said the issue should have been handled differently. But she also clarified how the posters came about.
As part of their critical thinking, students were asked to write down all the issues they have heard from the mainstream news, other information sources or commentary. The comments on the posters were not taught to students.
Lindfield Learning Village, we're told, is an experimental state school backed by the New South Wales Education Department with a more flexible curriculum and laxer rules than most. And local parents are queuing up to send their kids there. But on 2GB, New South Wales Upper House member and One Nation state leader Mark Latham demanded it be pulled into line.
It sounds like it's a sinkhole for leftist ideological teaching. I think we've got to do more than sack the teacher. I'd also sack the principal who's lost control of this school, and I would close down the experiment as failed and send it back to being a normal school.
Mark Latham has made attacking political correctness, especially in schools, his primary political agenda. His latest aim is to pass new laws banning discussion of gender fluidity in classrooms, which drew protests at hearings in State Parliament last Tuesday. So, the telly story on Wednesday landed at just the right time, almost like Latham had orchestrated it, which he says he did. As you can see from this exchange in the committee hearing after the paper landed.
You refer to the Daily Telegraph, the Reader's Digest, I think, of facts.
No, I refer to the poster that I gave the Telegraph. So I've seen the poster, OK, pictures of the poster.
So it's Mark Latham and the Daily Telegraph, that well-known
impeccable
sources.
Impeccable sources, but it's a serious issue.
Impeccable sources indeed. Latham wasn't just quoted in the story, he helped create it by sending the images to the telly, which duly put the story on the front page. And this was not a first. Latham, the former Labor opposition leader turned firebrand commentator turned One Nation politician, works hand in glove with the telly on a regular basis, either feeding them stories or providing the necessary outrage to make them work. Like this one last month.
One Nation MP Mark Latham said political voodoo theories, such as white privilege and unconscious bias, were not only confusing children, but destroying the innocence of childhood.
Or this one in February about racial training for the Governor-General's staff.
New South Wales Upper House MP Mark Latham said unconscious bias did not exist.
Or this one about gender classes in childcare 3 days earlier.
Mark Latham called the lessons ridiculous and said sexual fluidity was totally inappropriate for kids of such a young age.
And a week after that, Latham was fuming about Sydney University's decision to turn its logo shades of rainbow.
Latham said the move was another example of a bloated, indulgent, out-of-touch higher education system.
And in January, it was all about political correctness in comedy.
Latham agreed that social media had become medieval in judging people by how they look, the identity politics of race, gender and sexuality.
We looked back through every Telegraph this year, and of the 116 editions of the paper, we found that 25 quoted the state's One Nation leader, or more than 1 in 5. Not bad for a state upper house crossbench politician. And how does his score compare to some others on the crossbench? Well, the two Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party members have scored 4 telly mentions between them all year. And the two Animal Justice Party members, just 1. The same for Fred Nile from the Christian Democrats and independent Justin Field. Yup, it is quite a record. No one generates outrage and stories quite like One Nation's Mark Latham. But now, let's go to one of the Australian media's favourite subjects, property prices.
Melbourne property prices have gone through the roof.
And people are crying at auctions. It's a very emotional time for buyers, feeling like they can't get into this market.
House prices across the nation rose by 3% in March alone, the fastest in 3 decades. And some in the media have been busy fanning home buyers' fear of missing out, with sensational stories like this one on Studio 10.
Eddie Deline is just 29 years old and owns 29 properties. He joins us now to share his secrets.
And it's not just on TV. News Corp sites have featured one young Aussie couple with a $20 million property portfolio 3 times in the last month, with news.com.au, the Herald Sun and the Daily Telegraph all spruiking the couple's good fortune and their buyer's agency business.
Couple reveal light bulb moment that helped them net $1 million a year in rents and retire in their 20s.
Aussie couple who turned $60,000 house deposit into $20 million property portfolio.
Real estate investment's next step, commercial property success.
And even the ABC has got in on the act with this story of a Melbourne first home buyer who resorted to social media to beat the competition.
Sick of being outbid at auctions and competing with crowds of other people for a home in her dream suburb, Katie Higgins turned to Facebook.
What a great idea. So, did she actually buy a home through Facebook? Well, no, as it turned out, because
a house in their price range came up through a real estate agent, which they ended up buying.
Yes, stop the press. Couple buys home through real estate agent. Wow. But also driving fear of missing out are the property pundits who've been making breathless forecasts like this one from Australia's biggest bank.
Despite the pandemic, house prices are expected to skyrocket. The Commonwealth Bank predicts home prices in Sydney will rise by more than 13% over the next 2 years.
And you can trust the Commonwealth Bank because they know what they're talking about, don't they? Don't they? Well, 12 months ago, the bank was predicting a far bigger crash.
The country's biggest lender is warning house prices could plummet by almost a third because of the coronavirus pandemic. Commonwealth Bank's worst-case scenario sees an average 32% drop by March 2023.
And the media certainly took those dire warnings seriously, with both the ABC and the Sydney Morning Herald pouncing on the gloomy prediction. That was, of course, the worst-case scenario, but it was also the one the media chose to highlight, as they did with other experts. Here's SQM Research's Louis Christopher in April last year.
And when I say major, we're talking up to a 30% decline over a 12-month period, with the bulk of those declines occurring in Sydney and Melbourne.
And he too has done a complete U-turn, offering this revised prediction just 2 months ago.
Our expectation is that prices will rise. Our forecast is for 2021 is that dwelling prices nationally will rise between 5 to 9%.
Shane Oliver has also pulled off a dramatic 180, forecasting doom and gloom in March last year.
The unemployment rate is at least going to get to 10%, and that opens up the possibility that property prices could fall as much as 20%.
And seeing nothing but blue skies ahead 12 months later.
I think we're going to see more gains. I wouldn't be at all surprised if prices go up by another 15 to 20% over the next 18 months to 2 years.
And also doing the full volte-face was today's money expert Effie Zahos, predicting big falls last May.
You're looking at that falling by 32% by the end of 2022. That's really suggesting there's no V-shaped recovery in all of this, is there?
It would take a while. I mean, it means $1 million property you can pick up for $700,000, and that's what I guess Sydney siders are looking at.
But last month, forecasting huge rises.
This is the median price now, and on the far right, assuming, let's say, this is a scenario that the RBA, does say that it increases by 30%. You could pocket $300,000 over the next 3 years if you jump in now. It seems like a sure thing.
Up, down, up, down. And who can forget US doomster Harry Dent, who sent the Australian media into a spin last May with warnings like this.
Nothing can stop it.
Sydney and Melbourne property prices could fall by 50% as debt bubble set to burst, Economist warns.
To be fair to all the experts, it did look bad at the time. And it didn't help that the media highlighted the scariest scenarios. But as we know, the crash never came. national house prices fell by only 2% and are now rebounding, which is why Natasha Belling quipped on Seven's morning show last month.
I sometimes think the experts maybe don't know what's going on.
And which led the Herald's Jennifer Duke to ask,
So, given the track record of property price forecasts over the past year and the difficulties in determining the future during an uncertain time, how cautious should we be when believing these various claims? The answer? Very cautious.
So, what about that boom, which certainly is now happening in all capital cities? Well, don't bank on it lasting. As the ABC told us last week,
housing boom may be halted by regulators or economic trends, analysts warn.
And the New Daily had similar advice for readers as it gazed into its updated crystal ball.
Worried about housing? Here are 3 reasons the boom won't last.
And is that right? Who knows? However smart the forecasters are, however powerful their computers, trying to predict house prices is a mug's game. The experts don't really know what's going to happen, and the media just ramp up the most dramatic predictions. So, if you're convinced you're going to make a fortune, don't bank on it. And if you're afraid of missing out, relax. Well, maybe. And that's all from us tonight. There's more on our website where you can stream or download the programme. And don't forget, Media Bites every Thursday online. But for now, until next week, goodbye.